Hello and welcome to the final video tutorial for the Leaping Hair project. So this session's all around presentation and sort of finishing of the project. So I want to look at adding whiskers in this piece and then look at the presentation. So some of you may already have some fabulous ideas about how you want to display your hair. I know I've seen a few examples coming through which are stunning, so yeah, that's really great to see and always inspiring. But if you're struggling a little bit, I've got a suggestion for you, and it is a little bit different. It's that mix of vintage and wool, which is my favourite, and I've added some wire because you know I like wire sculpture and armatures. So I think it's a nice blend, and so I'll show you how I've approached my finishing piece just to give you a little bit of inspiration. So to get started, I want you to have a needle to go with your thread. Now this is just a nylon thread. It's almost like a dark brown colour, but you can get invisible thread as well. I've got my scissors at hand. I've got a sort of high-tech, it's like a very sticky glue. Get it in craft shops, and it comes out quite slowly here when I've just snipped the top off, which is helpful, then it doesn't damage my piece. And then you can add a paint finish. You can either leave this nylon thread the colour that it is, so it's a dark brown, or if you want to highlight that a little bit more, you could use an acrylic paint over the top. But I'm going to use a very quick piece, which is just a white paint marker. So it's only going to be a quick tutorial, but then we'll get into presentation, which will be exciting. So the hardest bit of this tutorial is going to be threading the needle. So let's see how we get on. I've already got paint all over my hands anyway, so there we go. Please get through. Yay! I've managed first time, which is a shock in itself. So now I'll just trim a section off. So I've got quite a long piece on here that I've just snipped away. So you may have a shorter piece just to, especially if you've got the thread within the needle felting kits that I would have sent to you, you'll have a limited amount. So just keep that a little bit, not maybe as generous as I have. So I've noticed on the hare's head, I have 3 little dots here and 2 on this side. So I do need to put another little grey dot there. But what I want you to do is I'll take, let's go for one of the back ones. I'm just going to push the needle through, and you can keep moving it back and forward just until you get sort of the same angle that's going through instead of going in a different direction. So that's pretty straight. So I'll take that through. I'll make sure I've got the length on this side retained. Okay, so because I've cut myself a generous piece, I can do that. Take your needle off, just put it to one side and don't lose it like I have done before when you just pop it on your craft table. So now that I've got those in place, I now want to secure those. So a very simple way to do that is to take the glue. I'm putting my fingers underneath here so that if there's any glue that's going to drip on this, it will drip onto my finger. Now it was playing before, so let's just try this again. Just bear with me 1 second. Just decided just to clog up a little bit. There we go, got that piece out. So again, I'm just pop my fingers underneath, and then I'll take the glue and it just take a small amount. Okay, and I'm just wiping it underneath and it doesn't sort of drip. And then now as I've got that piece, I'm going to pull that through, and then I'm going to add a little bit more on this side, and I'm going to pull that through. Okay, so just bounce that around a little bit. Okay, and then you can dab any of the excess or just wipe it. Now actually by wiping it, it also makes the nylon thread white. It gives it that sort of colour. So I'm just going to pull that a little bit more, there's a bit more glue on that side. So do be careful with this, because it can be a little bit tricky, and I don't want you to spoil your beautiful pieces, but you can just sort of dab that away. If it was too much, you could maybe just snip the top parts of the wool. So now you've got the glue, and we know that that's going to go through, and it's at the ends as it extends out of the face here. So let's carry on to the next part, because that will need to dry. And this part now, I'm going to take my pen, but as I said, you may want to paint this a certain colour, a different colour. Acrylic paints would work well. And it's the same sort of thing here. I'm just going to hold this and run that along. In fact, if I just hold the end of this and I just move up and down and also underneath. Okay. Oops. That's better. So then I'll move to the opposite side. And I'm just going to hold that thread a little bit tight between my finger and thumb. So underneath and over the top a couple of times. I'll put my pen to the side, and then I'm just going to cut away. So I've not decided here the length that I want them to be. So they're just, I'm just going to let those dry. So really, when it comes to the whiskers on this suggestion I've given you, it's really quite quick in the demonstration of it, but I would like you to take your time. I don't want you to spoil your piece. And there are other ways that you can add whiskers. You may use horsehair as well, could be used. I'm sure as we've got a few accomplished needle felters, so you may have already used that and have your own preferred sort of style, but this is just one way that you could do that. I'm going to look at the finishing now. So when it comes to the finishing, because we've been moving this piece around all the time, and the lovely fibre that we selected, it can brush and just have some longer fibres that come back out. So when it comes to the head, if this was going to be a piece that may go on a craft stall that I was doing, or if it was a commission for somebody, or I'm just keeping it in my house as a piece for myself, I tend to, I'm not cutting into the fibres at all here, but you can just gently almost pat and snip. So if there are any of those long unruly fibres that, like you won't be able to see it, but there's a long twisty one here, so I would just snip that off. So I would maybe do a little bit of that, just popping that together and just, you know, taking my time on that. We've also got our finishing needle, so we've got the pale blue needle, which is what I would recommend, which is a twisted needle, a 40 gauge one. And so this just needs you just to almost cover the whole surface and tap, tap, tap. It may seem like nothing is really happening, but it will take those fibres and compact and give you a smooth finish. So it's just a combination of the two and getting everything in place. When it comes to the ears, again, these lovely long fibres have just got squished a little bit. So I'm going to just take the needle and brush those in the right direction that I wanted. And it gives you an opportunity then, if you have missed a piece and you've got a longer piece, or you want to do a little bit more snipping away at that. Okay, so I'm quite happy with where he is now, so I'm going to class him as being finished, although I have got a few more whiskers to add later. So what I want to do now is we're going to look at the presentation for this piece. And when I was thinking about this, I'd always envisioned the hair sort of leaping either over something, whether that would be, I can't even think, you know, whether it's a toadstool or there's something there that makes him want to leap over it. But I like the idea of having sort of like a meadow, like grasses and things like that underneath as well. So with that in mind, what I wanted to do is to get some really lovely green wool. Now, green for me is always a difficult colour to purchase, especially when you're ordering online, because it's either too sort of mossy coloured, or it can be really dark. It's never quite what I would class as a realistic green, like a lawn green, if you will. And that was until I found this gorgeous fibre. It's a variegated green, a short fibre wool, a carded wool that's from the makers in the UK as a supplier. So I've used a few of their wools, really good quality, but this one is by far my favourite, so I always have a bag of this on hand. And then what I want you to do with your selected green, whatever green you've got, is we're going to pull a very thin strip off and we just twist. Okay, twist away. If it gets a bit thicker, we can bounce the fibres and we twist again. Bounce and twist. I'm not bouncing and pulling too much because I don't want to break the fibre, but if you've done a long piece and it does break, it's not, honestly, it's not a problem, but I tend to keep it on one piece until you end up with something like that length. Okay, and then what I want to introduce is Pavapol. So this is quite a large tub of Pavapol. I'll just take the lid off this. Now I would normally move some of the liquid, which is it's a fabric hardener and it's transparent, this one. You can get it in other colours. Now what I should do is take an amount of this liquid and put it into a little tub, because you can already see there's a few of the fibres because I've just gone straight in, being impatient as I am sometimes. And then what I want you to do is have a paintbrush. Now this is really old, it's already sort of firm at the end because I've used it with the Pavapol that many times that the bristles here on the brush are just all together, but that's fine. So I'm going to move him out of the way 1 second just while we do this piece. So again, a quick demonstration. So if I just paint a little bit of this along there, and then I will move my way along. So what happens now is I start to get the Pavapol on my fingers as well. Okay, so not a major issue, but it can start to get crumbly. So I've just put a little bit on there, just as a quick example. And so now I want you to just roll that. Now it's always better when your hands are clean, so if you've done one of these and the Pavapol starts to set and get really crumbly on your fingers, go and wash your hands. Because what happens, I'll carry on with it here and show you. Can you see the bittiness now that's happening on my fingers? So I'll just push those to one side and just dust them off at the side. But if you catch it, it starts to crumble on here. So you can take that off or scratch just the surface if you need to. But I know there's some Pavapol in there now, so I'm just going to give it a little roll. Just firm that up. And that's it. And then I'll leave that to dry. Or I'll leave it to one side while I carry on with my next piece. So what happens, it just gives a little bit more firmness. So when I'm holding this up, it's not going to be as floppy in the wool. It's got some strength in it, but it also allows the end to fall over. So it does give it that sort of grass sort of texture. Now this is me just experimenting. Within anything that I do, I'm always very curious about mixing different things like the vintage element and wool and wire. I like to have a play around with mixed media, and I also think it's really good just to experiment with new products. So some of you will like this. I've probably made it look really, really easy, and when you start doing it, you'll message to say, oh, it was all over the place. Just take your time and have a play around with it. It's only a tiny bit of wool. The other suggestion that I've got for you, I'll just bring him back in so you've got something to focus on. So the other thing that I have got as a suggestion as well, it doesn't get as firm as the Pavapol, but I have got this sort of spray, and the spray itself is a starch and easy iron for a crisp, smooth finish to your shirts for ironing. So this was suggested by my mum actually, and I took a piece of tin foil and I put all these pieces out, so none of them are Pavapol, it's just the twisted plain wool. I layered them up and I sprayed it because I found for some makers that might be an easier option, especially if you're finding it difficult with your fingers to get that twist. Sometimes if you can't get the twist, you could just lay that in your hands and give it a roll. So firm. You'll feel your palms of your hand getting quite warm as well, which if you're doing this in the winter months, the cooler months would be quite nice. But if you're not, and it's going to be hot where I live, it has been quite warm this week, so don't want to do too much of this, but it's just another way of explaining to you that if you're finding it difficult with your fingers to maneuver them, the palms of your hands will do the job. And then instead of doing the Pavapol section, you might just want to spray with the starch. I would repeat that a couple of times. It doesn't keep as strong as this, but it's definitely got a crispness to it, so it will do the same job. So again, I'll just move those two examples to the side, and then I'll bring in how I visualized the finish for this piece. And this is a weaving one of the bobbins. So this reminds, I love everything vintage. I've got pieces in my craft room that have come from my grandparents, so they're dotted around, whether it's clocks on the walls or just little pieces that they may have made. And my grandmother worked in a cotton mill as well, so I always like these types of things. And so looking at this piece, I quite liked it. I saw a little bit of fringing on one side and it got me thinking, and it's got these sides here, and it's also got a little hole at the end here. So what I've done, if I bring that up to screen, is I have placed the grass along the edge, and I will continue to do that so that it's completely full. You could add little flowers that are made from wool, but I had some of these rather sweet wired flowers and leaves. There's a few more here that I've made. I often have a little jar full of these. I make greeting cards, so at the last minute, if there's a birthday card or something coming up, I can just quickly put something together that's a little bit unique as a piece. So there's always a stash around. So I've just taken some of those, and one is just a simple lilac wire here that I've just twisted around the round nose pliers to get the central section, and then I've just looped, simply just looped that around and then given myself a stem. These ones, these little black ones, if you can see those, are just little buds, so they're just twisted again with the round nose pliers, wrapping the the wire around that, twisting it up. And the other one is a little bit more complex. So this is just almost like a copper colour, and I've twisted one way, twisted the other, and I've just gone up until it's quite small and taken the long length back here. So it's almost like almost like a wheat type suggestion here, where it's just opening up. So there's no right or wrong with this. You could have a play around with the wire if you want to do something like this. And it might not be right for you, so you want to just keep it all wool, which is fine. But I'll always give you inspiration and suggestions. And do you know what? I am quite pleased with how it's looking. So just to recap, what I've done is I've taken some more, because I have enough of this fibre, you could use any colour, and I've rolled a piece of wool and I've needle felted it, and then I've pushed it into the gap here. So if I look on the underside, you can just see it coming through with some of the wires there. This central part of the bobbin here goes quite close to the side here, so the thickness of this wool reduces here. And I've taken my needle, and you need to be really careful because I know that this is hollow all the way through. So if I push that down, it will be through the other side. But as we get closer here, there's a lot of things that this can bounce off. So I tend, if I want to crunch the fibres, I'll put it on an angle. Instead of going down into the wood and catching it and breaking my needle, we're just going to tap at the side. Slow down the needle felt and just compact it in. So by compacting that, what I've done, it's enabled me then to take my grass. So I'll just say snip a little piece there. And you may want to even cut it on a slight angle, so it goes a little bit thinner at the top rather than a blunt square edge to it. And then what you could do is you would just place that on the inside so it is supported by the wood. And if I take my needle and I'm just going to gently tap that in. And again, just remember what I was saying, if you can tap, I'm going to hit the wood here. So I'm just going to push it as best I can. Now, if the second part of this is longer and it's just creeping up like it is here, just leave that coming through. And then what I've done is I've taken a little bit more of the fibre. And so when I add more grass pieces here, I will just put a piece over the top. And then I will compact that on an angle. So not going downwards. I'm almost just stroking the top of the wool and connecting those fibres. So it sort of sandwiches the connection of the grass to the wool here. It just gives another layer on top. And I think that's going to be sturdy enough. You know, if you start to pull these out, or a child was to get hold of this as an example, it will easily remove. It's not fixed, so there's possibly other ways that we could look, or you could look at having this a lot firmer, but I'm quite happy with that as a suggestion. And then once that's all in place, you can take your little wire pieces and then you can sort of just gently, this is a really soft wire, so I can feel it sort of bending. Yeah, you see how it's just doubled up on itself. I'll just take that piece out. So just straighten your wires. Oops. And then see if you can just get a little bit of wriggle room, which I have managed there. Pull that on the underside. And then what's helpful is you can then start to determine the height. How many of these? I would probably put about 3 flowers in here. Maybe 4. Let's just see. I've only got a few of them made up. But this one I made it have a twist, and then I've brought some of the grass blades in front of it. So just take your time and enjoy that piece. If this was a present, because it's on this front side, I quite like it. The other side of the bobbin, it's got like a groove in there. Now this is completely flat here. So if this was a present for somebody, you could even have something engraved, a little message or a name, and have that on the front there. Or you could even just put a bit of detail into the base of that. But I think it's a really lovely way of using something vintage and bringing it into the piece. Now, the other helpful part is because we have this little hole section, I've taken the wire and I've just bent it round on this one just for the purpose of when I was doing sort of my videos and tutorials. But what's helpful is I can push that through that piece, and that wire then sits under here. So when that's in place, I mean, at the moment he's going to sort of move around either side. So I will need to add something inside, maybe something like a filler, a wood filler, to place that in. But I quite like that suggestion there. So until I've put it in place, I can't sort of give you the insight into how that's going to hold just at the minute. But from what I can see, that wire is going to hold itself up. I just need to make sure that that wire doesn't twist, that it's kept firm. If it's kept firm, it will work. Okay, it has a little bit of a bounce in it as well. And the leap might not be as exaggerated. It might be more of a just gliding over the top of the grasses. You can heighten it a little bit more if you wanted it so the paws are landing. Now, another suggestion, so I'm always thinking and looking around on my very busy craft table, because I've got lots of different pieces, just as an example. So I've got like, this is a little glass greenhouse. Why wouldn't you have that on your desk? I've got lots of little bobbins with all pre-made little claws and fingers. I have got bobbins that are holders for my tools. I have got all sorts in front of me. And then what I've made quite a while ago, so it wasn't for this project, but I thought it was quite cute, was this lovely little dragonfly here. And it just, again, had it's got little wire legs, very thin wired legs, and a wired piece here. And then I've put some of these acetate wings on. And I found just at a local garden centre, but I've got a big thing for mushrooms and toadstools, but this beautiful green, it's got a little bit of glitter to it, it's beautiful. And that just sat in the top because there was a hole in there. So again, these things just creatively are always around me when I'm making pieces. But what I thought is, oh, I wonder if that would fit. So I do need to push it a little bit in here, but if I push that down, it holds. And so if I turn that way, again, it adds something else to the story of this leaping hare. So not only are you making an amazing sculptural piece, you're now creating the presentation and the story of this. And that's what I want you to start to think about when you start a project. From the very beginning, have some ideas or sketches or notes about how you think it could look. It might go a totally different direction, but it might be helpful for you then to sort of visualize your finishing piece. The other thing I found just minutes before filming this, again, is another sort of vintage. I'm not actually quite sure what it is. So it is part of the sort of bobbin type things. But again, can you imagine if this was beautifully painted as a toadstool? You know, that could be positioned and held in there. So if this was part of a collection and you had different leaping hares, I'm going to do one using the bobbin again, and I might have little mice running around on that one. I may have a fox and do something a little bit different. But if I saw that, I would definitely be purchasing it because I think it's quite unique. I think it's different, and I love the sort of twist of the different medias. So I hope that has been helpful to you and you've taken some inspiration. Just start to open your mind as possibilities when it comes to sort of presenting your work. And I really do hope that you've enjoyed the Leaping Hare project as much as I have. So yeah, I will look forward to hopefully seeing some of you on the next videos and projects. But thank you ever so much for taking part in this. I can't wait to see your work. So take care and we'll speak soon. Bye.